Welcome to the Maura Sweeney Podcast. Maura is an international speaker and the trademark ambassador of happiness with a passion for personal responsibility. She weaves insightful questions with personal stories to challenge your mindsets and empower your best and happiest self from the inside out. Here's Maura with today's podcast for you.
Is your focus on fear or faith? Well, if you're on a path to living happy from the inside out, you won't want to miss today's podcast because it is for you. Your focus. You know, whether we're aware of it or not, we're all focusing on something, and we always have the choice as to what that focus will be on. Most of the time, we never think about it because we get lost in our thoughts, lost in our emotions, and then we end up on a train ride somewhere that could be good for us or maybe not so great. So today I want to talk about our focus and whether we're placing that focus on fear or on faith. I'm going to, in today's podcast, give you some definitions. I'm going to give you some analogies. I'm going to give you a relatable story. And then I'm going to give you an action reminder so that by the time you are finished with this podcast, hopefully you'll decide you like it so much, you're downloading it, you're sharing it with friends, and you are going to listen to it again and again, because the very exercise of listening to this will help you start paying attention to your focus and remind you always to choose faith over fear. Now, what exactly is faith? I could go right to fear, but I think we all know what that is, and I'll touch on that later. But let's take the word faith. What does it mean? Well, according to dictionary.com, faith is complete trust in something or in someone. Think about that. Complete trust. When you think of complete trust or just the word trust, doesn't it make you feel at peace and at rest? Less worried? Okay. There's obviously a second definition for faith, and that is strong belief in God or the doctrines of a religion based upon, now this is where I want you to pay attention, based upon spiritual apprehension rather than proof. You know, there's a scripture in the New Testament that describes what faith is, and I kind of like this. And for anyone listening who either doesn't have a Christian background or really never thinks much about God, I want you to listen very closely to this definition of faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not yet seen. Think about that. The substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. Now, how many times, conversely, have you thought about fear? You might say, well, Maura, faith seems a little ridiculous, but let me tell you how many people have already determined that fear can best be described as false evidence appearing as real. Think about that. False evidence appearing as real. As in, proofs. That means including proofs. It means there's worry and dissociation and confusion and uncertainty that can fill your heart, your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, your body. And what they bring is a sense of dread or worst case scenarios. But if you want to think, on the other hand, about faith, faith is your inward belief, and it discounts all those outward so-called proofs or evidence. It helps you lean upon what you know to be true internally. Now, I want you to think about that. One looks all to the outside. The other stops, it breathes, it rests, and it allows something from within to speak. That something from within could be peace, could be wisdom, could be rest, could be happiness. When I think about fear, I always think about dread and worst case scenarios. But when I think about faith, just that word, and especially if you could remove from it all of that context that goes around religion, which oftentimes is filled with a lot of fear too. But the word faith, I think about hope. I think about positive expectation. I think about best case scenarios, even scenarios that are unfathomable to my mind at the present moment. I want you to think about that. It's almost like those things that are out of your mind, but wow, aren't they awesome? And whether I've thought about them or not, just considering something really good to happen, something amazing, something fantastic, something extravagant, think about the way it makes you feel from within. Think about the way it makes you rest. Think about the way it makes you behave, respond to everything and everyone around you. I want to give you a picture of fear versus faith that came to me earlier this week. A few times every week, I will drive across a bridge here in Tampa Bay, Florida. And the bridge actually just traverses over Tampa Bay. And the interesting thing about living down here, especially this time of year when we have a lot of tropical storms and even hurricanes, is that the sky can fill up with such dark and ominous and heavy clouds. It's just part of life down here. But this is what I noticed on a few occasions, and I thought, my goodness, what a fantastic word picture. On a certain number of mornings, I've looked one way across the bridge in one direction, and I do see these heavy, dark, ominous clouds. And I think, oh my goodness, you just get that very heavy feeling from them, like, whoa, today something could be blowing down. Maybe the electricity will be going. Maybe trees will be hitting into homes. Maybe there'll be accidents right here on the bridge because of all the winds. But I could turn my head, and maybe this is something we could only do here in Florida. I could turn my head and look the opposite way and see something else completely different, where the sky above has light clouds, white clouds, making room or separating, I would say, for the blue sky above to be coming through. And adding to that, given that early time of the morning, would be the early morning sunlight. And I can't tell you unless you've been here to see it, but we have some of the most magnificent sunrises and sunsets where there is the sun just rising above the bay, and you see it come forth little by little by little, and there is sparkling that shows up. There's color that emerges, and all of a sudden things get brighter and brighter, and all I could think about is, wow, it's a new day, and it's the beginning of everything new. There's so much beauty here, and there's so much possibility. Now, I want you to think I'm on the very same bridge going across the same body of water, but based upon which way I focus, one way or the other, I can literally be looking at two outward different scenarios. One creates dread, and the other just opens up my mind, my thoughts, my energy, and my emotions to all these positive and faith-filled possibilities. Now, what do you have in your own life that relates to that? You must have something where you could say, wow, what have I been looking at? And is there something else completely opposite that fills me with faith rather than dread and fear? Early on other mornings, I would say in the pre-dawn hours, I'll take a walk with my husband. We'll walk along the same Tampa Bay, but we'll be on land. And we start out when it is pretty much dark, and we might go out for an hour, a little bit more. And during that time period, we are right next to Tampa Bay. Now, at the beginning, when everything is dark, all we see is darkness. But when we reach a certain point where we're able to look at that water and that sunlight of a brand new day starts to emerge, I can't tell you how many times I've had to actually stop and take it in as if I'm taking it in through a straw. Not only through my eyes, but through my senses, through everything that's within me. The beauty of the sunlight is so extraordinary. If you want to think not just of orange and pink, but peach and rose. Sometimes the clouds show up in all of those colors and in purples, and the sky is blue, and you could see the light dancing on Tampa Bay waters. And then I could also see the sunlight dancing upon the windows across the street of homes that are overlooking the bay. And oftentimes it'll bring me back to the way I felt as a very young person. If you want to think about this, young children can either wake up in the morning or they can be somewhere, but they're filled with wonder and amazement, where things are almost like a fantasy. Nobody's put any I would say any fences on anything. Nobody's put any barriers on anything, because little kids, they'll see something sparkling and they'll think about all these great things. They'll get very excited and very happy. And watching this just the other day, I thought, well, there's something to this. What is it that we're focusing in on? Many of us, if we pay attention to the world as it appears on the outside, the news as it presents itself, whether it's on the far left or the far right, people, promoting division among others, all kinds of potential possibilities of what could go wrong in life, all those things that people tend to get attached to and attracted by and magnetized to, that only promote a feeling of fear. That's part of the very thing we can end up focusing in on without realizing. Now, the final thing I want to introduce in this podcast about focus goes back to something I remember when I was very young. And I guess I'm reminded of the power of focus each morning when I see the sunrise. Because of this, when I was 5 years old, back in 1963, I was one of those little kids. Everything was exciting. Everything was beautiful. Everything was fantastic. Everything was glorious. Everything was fun, happy, filled with surprises, and very good vibes for the anticipation of the future. Now, I could tell you, if I wanted to envision the way I focused in on life on the inside, I want to use an old word. They used to call it this in the old movies. It was called Technicolor. And back when I was small, if you went to a movie and that movie was created in Technicolor, you knew you were going to be wowed by color, and not just color as it existed, but all the life that came out of the multiplicity of color and design. And it was a wonderful feeling that you got looking at color. Well, I could remember that I was filled with that in my life, whether I thought of it or not. But in a matter of a few weeks, I had not one, but two very serious things that took place. One was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who for me personified hope and peace and good expectations, faith-filled expectations, not only for the United States and my life, but for everybody in our country and for everybody in the world. There was a sense of peace and joy and positive anticipation. Well, also within that same couple of weeks that JFK was assassinated, I had another extremely jarring experience in my life. Now, I was only in kindergarten, but the best way to describe it is that my internal life went from Technicolor and all the great things that went along with it to black and white. Now, imagine just being 5, but maybe you were someone who was brought up during a time of war or famine, or maybe you had some terrible things going on within your own family. You know what I'm speaking about. There is something that lodges inside the soul, and it's filled with heaviness. It's filled with a sense of dread. And so I had a lot of this covering me and enveloping me as a young person. But I share all this with you today because I learned, even as you can, to choose where my attention would be focused. I could look back on that era and think, wow, those were some very traumatizing events for me. But I could also realize, looking at things from a completely different vantage point, that though they were difficult, they sobered me. They made me so much more aware of the world in which I lived. It matured me. Those events caused me to find my own faith from within, caused me to choose happiness over sorrow, positive expectation over dread, even if I had to do it again and again and again, to the point where people who didn't know me back then or during my growing up years, if they had never met me then and they know me today, they would never know it was the same person. But there's more that I want to share with you on this topic. And I want you to listen more closely than you even realize. We live in a world where everyone, or so many people, unwittingly walk around in a place of fear. Their mind, their emotions, their attention is all geared toward what can go wrong or what they imagine can go wrong. And as a result, when you meet them, you're standing in front of not their faith, but you're standing in front of their fear. They pose to you a question mark in a realm that maybe you can or cannot discern, but the question mark of their doubt and their fear is always with them. This is the final thing I want to tell you. When you can learn to choose faith over fear, to focus on the good, the things within you that you know are good and praiseworthy, filled with positive expectations, that very enlightening energy that makes you think, whoa, it's a new day, anything that can happen now. When you learn how to do that, not only does that change the resonance, the energy, the expectation, and everything that goes on within you as an individual, but you become like the morning sun to everyone else that sees you. You're not making just a difference in your own life. You're not just taking your own soul back and living from that inner space. You become a living resonance to other people that is a reminder to them of hope, of faith, of goodness, of good expectations, of anything can happen, of, wow, it's a new day. I wonder what great thing can take place today. If you want to change your world and you want to be a catalyst for changing the world around you, give yourself even a few minutes in the morning. Check yourself in the middle of the day and remind yourself before you go to sleep at night, what have I been focusing in on? Am I thinking about fear, or am I focusing in on faith? If you could remember to do this repeatedly, your soul will start to speak for you, walk for you, talk for you, energize for you, prepare paths in front of you, and change the world from night to morning, from dark to light, from sorrow to joy. I hope that you will download this podcast, that you will give it a thumbs up, that you will send it to other people, and that you will remember, especially when you need it, because I'm almost certain you're going to need it soon, that you take it out again and remind yourself, faith is my truth. Until the next time, this has been Maura with Maura for You.
For more insights on living happy from the inside out, subscribe to this podcast. To learn more about Maura, visit her MauraForYou.com website, where you'll find videos, blogs, books, and the Foundations of Happiness self-study e-course. Maura, 4, letter U.com, where Maura is always for you.